Performing Salatul Layl is a provision value. But as Allama Iqbal, the great poet of Pakistan and the subcontinent said, uh, obviously if I translate it then it's going to be destroyed. He says, Humse hai pyar kahan neend tumhe pyari hai. You don't love us. God, he addresses human beings. He says, you don't love me. You love your nightly sleep. You love your slumber, right? So when it comes to making that decision, when the mobile starts ringing in the morning, and because we are religious people, obviously the alarm is something like Rabbana and things of this sort, right? Because we like that, right? So it starts ringing in the morning and we say, Astaghfirullah, Ya Allah, bibakhshit. We're very sorry. We click the button and it's gone, right? We're going to have Namaz al-Fajr. Analyze why this decision was made and then compare this to the fact that if your doorbell was ringing at the same time, something as mundane as that, I'm not even talking about an earthquake, the doorbell, it might have been a mistake someone might have done because it's dark at night, right? Someone wanted to go to your neighbor's house and they rang your bell instead. But you'll get up, you'll go outside, you'll check. Even if there's a slight sound outside your house, oh, you think maybe it's a robber or something, right? And it turns out to be a cat prowling for food. But you get up. But Salatul Layl, no, sorry God. I know all the sustenance is here, but maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. And then for people like me, 38 years have passed, maybe the day after. And then one day there, we find ourselves lying facing the Qibla, people throwing dust upon our dead bodies. And we are still thinking, oh, maybe the day after. So the point is, the value system in our minds, obviously I simplified the whole psychological issue. It's much more complicated than that. But it's something called tazahum, right? And because many of our brothers here are students in the Hausa, it is a conflict between two pieces of positive values, right? And that conflict, that determines how you decide things. And it's not involuntary, it is voluntary. We're not talking about predestination, we're not talking about some robots who just work according to their operating systems. It is voluntary, but most of the time we do not have tawajjuh, we do not have attention towards taking a conflicting decision, taking a decision that goes against those internalized values that we have. So that was an example of how our values become corrupted. Even the most religious of our people, even people like students of the Hausa, okay? So this is not something which has exceptions. Everyone at some level or the other is afflicted with this problem. So when we understand that this happens, and this happens throughout our lives, right? So the value system, first of all, is created through mimicking what people around us are doing, our parents, our siblings, our community. Then we are receiving contradictory narratives from different people. Like if you're living in a society which has different kinds of people, which every society is, right? You're getting different messages from society. You're sitting maybe after Eid someday and all of your relatives are joined together and you listen to an uncle saying, you know, education is the most important thing in life. If you don't have education, you won't be able to earn a good living. Right? And you are a kid, you're a youngster, you're a teenager. This is stored in your psychology, right? Then this message keeps repeating and that makes it stronger within your psychology. At the same time, you're receiving a contradictory message, maybe from a member. The scholar sitting there, he's saying, the most important thing in life is Iman, that is your faith. And risk, sustenance is from God. You just have to put in the effort in the halal way and He will give you. So this leads to what is called cognitive dissonance. Two different kinds of narratives within your mind, two different kinds of pieces of one operating system. If I were to give another example, it would be that of technology in our time, right? A mobile phone, a laptop. Consider, when do we say that a laptop is suffering from a virus? When is it polluted by a virus? When there is contradictory data, contradictory programming that has come into the laptop, and that goes against the internal logic of, for example, the Windows programming or the Apple programming or whatever, the Android programming in your mobile. Right? This internal conflict is called a virus when we're talking about technology. And little do we realize that we ourselves are afflicted with the same kind of virus. There are different types of narratives within our mind, different types of fundamental values within our mind, and they are conflicting with one another. And this is natural. I'm not blaming anyone for it. This is natural. When people are in society, they will interact with different kind of people. They will, in our time especially, because of social media, because of television, because of the internet, you will receive contradictory kinds of messages, and they will be stored into your subconscious. You can't filter them out. Even when you're looking at something and you're saying, this is wrong, you're still receiving the message. Somewhere in your psychology, it gets stored. And we have so many, like for example, just to make things, relate things to the narrated traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali alayhi salam, please recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad al-Farad. Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he talks about looking at na-mahram, right? So he says when someone, a teen, especially a youngster, when they look at a na-mahram, it's like an arrow that has been released from the bow, right? It will have its effect, even if you turn your face away. So you should be particularly careful in that regard. Let's take the same example and kind of expand it for all sorts of messages, all sort of data that you receive. The data will have its takwini, its existential, its, I don't know how to translate takwini, its physical effect upon your soul, even if you reject that data, right? So that gets stored somewhere inside you. And one of the reasons why we have this whole principle of nahi anil munkar, that even if you do not have the power to stop someone from doing wrong or saying something wrong, you should at least reinforce your own values within. Tell yourself, this is wrong. I am against this view. That provides you with some sort of a virus card against that message. Stops it from entering and storing itself in your hard drive within your psychology, and then influencing decisions later on when your guard is down. So this is natural. This is natural. Now, God, who created us, knew that this would happen. He knew that this would happen. And for this purpose, He sent for us, before we actually need, throughout the ages, He sent for us His message, His divine message. The most complete of those divine messages, the most pure of those divine messages, in fact, the absolutely pure of those divine messages is the Holy Qur'an. And then when you look at the teachings of the Qur'an itself and the narrated traditions about reciting the Qur'an, you will find two messages being repeated over and over again. The first message is, God recommends that you read the Qur'an a lot, as much as you can. This is the exact translation of the ayah. As much as is comfortable for you. And obviously, is depending upon your own common sense, right? Person like me would say, okay, how much is enough for me? How much is comfortable for me? Okay, Ramadan, 5 minutes before iftar. No, he's depending on my common sense. He's saying, I'm giving you medicine, but you're allowed to use it daily to your leisure. So obviously, it should at least be as much as some of the other tasks that we are performing for our dunya. And brothers and sisters, please realize our dunya here in the Hawza is our teaching and our learning and our lessons. We're not involved in like making high rises or buying and selling cars here, right? But our dunya is this, right? So if our normal class is 1 hour long or 50 minutes long, doesn't the Quran deserve at least the same value? So one of the messages that repeats itself over and over again is read the Quran as much as possible, as much as doesn't become counterproductive for you in the sense of making you uncomfortable and making you tired. Right? And if you look at the practical examples of Imam Khomeini, of the other ulama, you will see how their lives were dedicated to Quran. So this is the first message that is repeated in the Quran and the narrated traditions of how to use the Quran itself. The second message is that the Quran and the narrated traditions of the Ahl al-Bayt, they shun, they reject this superficial recitation that we normally have in society. Reading the Quran like a parrot does, not understanding what it says. They don't accept this to be something that should be normal. In fact, there are words like Allahumma inni a'udhu bika. The prayer of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, please recite the salawat. His prayer alayhi salam about reading the Quran says, "O God, I seek refuge in you." With these terms, I seek refuge in you from reading the Quran without pondering about it, without thinking about it, without contemplating its message. So sometimes, brothers and sisters, we are afflicted with a kind of religiosity that is, in fact, against our own religion. How strange and how sorry it is, and how truly it is a tragedy that sometimes people can spend the entirety of their lives thinking that they're religious, whereas they never troubled themselves to go and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Ahlul Bayt about what true religion was. Right? So these two messages are repeated in the Quran and the narrated traditions. One, reading the Quran continuously, having a program in your daily lives, a plan in your daily lives for the Quran, giving the Quran the importance it deserves so that you do not become an instance of that ayah in the Quran which says that the Quran on the day of judgment will complain about those who threw the Quran behind their backs, who abandoned the Quran and its usability and its utility. So that is the first message that we have in the Quran and from the Ahlul Bayt. And the second is contemplation. We have this story from the traditions of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Please recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. That after Ramadan, the Holy Prophet was asking his companions how much of the Quran they had read. And someone said that I read it 3 times, another one said 6 times, another one said 10 times, and so on and so forth. Then it came to Salman al-Muhammadi, Salman al-Farsi, Rizwanullah ta'ala. And the Prophet asked him, and he said, I just recited a few verses. And everyone was kind of snickering, making fun of him, right? And the Prophet asked, why did that happen? Obviously, he knew why it happened, right? But he wanted the other people to learn what Salman has and they do not. So Salman said that I spent the entire Ramadan thinking about these few verses that I read. And the Prophet said, this is the kind of recitation that we want, mafhum kalam. Thinking about the Quran so that it becomes inculcated within your soul. We have this narrated tradition from the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. They say that when a youngster reads the Quran, and obviously they mean reading it in the proper manner, when he or she reads the Quran, it becomes part of his flesh, his blood, his bones, his very essence. If you translate this further, this youngster becomes a walking, talking Quran.